That night was never planned. Nothing about it was expected, and maybe that's why it still lingers in memory like a fire that refuses to burn out. It started with something so ordinary, a conversation that felt harmless, a glance that lasted just a second too long. But within that moment, something shifted, like a door cracking open inside, one that had been bolted shut for years. A single spark of weakness, or maybe it was longing, slipped through, and everything began to change. There had been tension building quietly, like a storm gathering behind calm skies. It wasn't spoken, but it was there, alive in the pauses, in the way silence seemed heavier whenever he was close. Eyes met and then quickly broke away, yet the weight of that gaze left the skin warm long after. Every word seemed to carry more meaning than it should. Every laugh felt like an invitation. Every touch that wasn't supposed to happen lingered as if asking for more. It's strange how desire works, how it seeps into the cracks of ordinary moments, how it grows quietly when left unspoken. The mind tried to ignore it, tried to push it aside, but the body kept remembering. A brush of a hand, an accidental closeness, the way his presence filled the room. It wasn't just attraction. It was something far more dangerous. Vulnerability was tangled up in it, like opening a secret diary and letting someone read every hidden thought. The night it finally happened didn't feel like a decision. It felt like surrender. There was no carefully drawn plan, no plotting of what would come. There was only the heartbeat, pounding so loudly it drowned out reason, and the heat in the air that made everything else disappear. One step closer became another, and suddenly distance didn't exist. His breath was near enough to feel, and in that closeness, the last bit of resistance broke. When his lips touched mine, it wasn't just a kiss, it was the breaking of a dam. Everything I had tried to hold back rushed out in waves I couldn't control. Passion collided with fear, longing collided with restraint, and in the middle of it all was truth, a truth that had been waiting, desperate to be acknowledged. My hands trembled, not from doubt, but from the overwhelming rush of finally giving in. The room seemed to change shape, shrinking until nothing existed beyond the two of us. His touch was not gentle in the way of politeness. It was gentle in the way of someone who understands what it means to be fragile. Fingers traced along skin like they were memorizing, not just touching. Every breath was heavy with meaning, every movement deeper than physical need. It felt like being seen in a way that stripped away all the years of pretending, all the layers built to survive. Desire burned hotter with every second, but beneath the fire was a tenderness that broke me open. Vulnerability poured out, uninvited but unstoppable, and I let it. His body pressed closer, and the line between weakness and strength blurred until they were the same thing. It wasn't just surrender, it was trust, fragile and terrifying, but real. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive in a way that wasn't about survival or routine. It was about connection, raw and unfiltered. Every moment of that night is etched into memory as if carved in stone. The heat of his skin against mine, the sound of his voice low and unsteady, the way his eyes searched as though afraid to miss a single piece of me. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't careless. It was a collision of hunger and tenderness, of desire and emotion, all tangled together until I couldn't separate them. There was a moment, quiet, almost still, when he simply held me, his hand on my face, his thumb brushing against my cheek as if to remind me I was real. That simple touch struck harder than the fire between us. It was intimacy stripped of any disguise, proof that what was happening wasn't just lust. It was deeper, more dangerous, because it touched places inside I had long forgotten. The world outside didn't matter. The rules, the fears, the reasons why this shouldn't happen, they dissolved in the heat of that night. What remained was truth, a truth born of longing that had waited far too long to be felt. I let go of the doubts, the walls, the constant fight to stay guarded. I let him in, fully, completely, knowing that after this nothing would be the same. And when it was over, when the night had finally softened into stillness, I realized that something irreversible had taken place. It wasn't just a body that had been touched, it was a soul. Vulnerability had collided with passion, and together they created something unforgettable. That night was more than desire. It was an awakening, the opening of a door that could never again be closed. That one night changed everything. It began so quietly that at first it didn't seem dangerous. A glance held too long, a smile that lingered just enough to stir something restless inside. Nothing was said, yet everything was felt. It was in the way his eyes found mine across a room, steady, unwavering, as though he already knew the secret I was trying to hide. That look carried more weight than 1,000 words, and it burned long after it ended. The space between us became charged, filled with a tension that seemed to grow heavier with every passing day. Conversations felt ordinary on the surface, but underneath them lived something unspeakable, something that pressed closer with each shared laugh and each pause that stretched into silence. It wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't. It was the way his voice softened when he spoke near me, the way his presence seemed to fill every part of me even when he wasn't touching me. I tried to ignore it, to push it back into shadows where it belonged, but the body has its own memory. A brush of his hand against mine left a heat that no amount of pretending could erase. A simple touch, accidental in every way that mattered, became a fire that spread through me until I could think of nothing else. Every time it happened, every time his skin grazed mine, it felt like the world paused for just a breath, holding me captive in a moment I shouldn't have wanted but couldn't resist. Silence became the loudest part of us. When words failed, when propriety demanded restraint, silence told the truth. In those stolen glances, in the moments when our eyes locked and neither of us dared to move, there was an entire conversation taking place. Desire spoke louder than logic. Vulnerability whispered louder than reason. And in that silence, we both knew where this was heading, even if neither of us dared to admit it. There was an evening I still can't forget. The air was thick with unspoken words, heavy with all the things I wouldn't allow myself to say. He stood close, close enough that his breath brushed against my skin, close enough that my pulse betrayed me, racing wildly in the stillness. His hand hovered, not touching, just near enough to make my body ache with the anticipation of it. The space between us was unbearable, intoxicating, like standing on the edge of a cliff and daring gravity to pull me over. In that moment, everything about him was forbidden. The rules, the boundaries, the expectations of a world that would never understand, all of it stood like walls between us, and yet the desire only grew stronger in the face of those walls. It was the impossibility that made it irresistible, the knowing that we shouldn't made every accidental brush of his hand, every stolen glance, feel like a secret sin too sweet to abandon. I began to crave the smallest things. The way his eyes would find mine in a crowded place, the way his voice would lower when it was just us, the way his presence seemed to bend the air, making me forget anyone else was near. Every detail became a thread in the web we were spinning, and soon I was tangled, unable to imagine breaking free. What made it unbearable was the restraint, that constant edge of almost, the way his hand would linger just close enough to my skin without closing the gap. The way his eyes would linger on my mouth, then break away as though he'd forbidden himself from the very thought. That push and pull became the fire between us, feeding on what we didn't do, what we didn't say. It built higher and hotter until it felt impossible that it wouldn't one day consume us. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying those moments, tormenting myself with the way they made me feel. His eyes, his touch, his silence, they filled me with a longing so raw it felt unbearable. It wasn't lust alone, though the hunger was undeniable. It was deeper. It was the sense of being seen, fully and without disguise, by someone who wasn't supposed to look at me that way but did anyway. That kind of intimacy is rare. It is dangerous, and it is unforgettable. When it finally broke, when the tension finally spilled over into something real, it felt less like a choice and more like inevitability. All those silences, all those stolen moments, had written a story neither of us could erase. The heat of his mouth on mine, the weight of his hands, the way our bodies pressed together, it all felt like the natural ending to a chapter that had been building far too long. And in that surrender, I understood something I had been afraid to admit. Forbidden or not, this was more than desire. This was the kind of connection that strips you bare, that refuses to be buried beneath rules or reason. It was a fire lit in silence, grown in restraint, and finally released in a rush of passion that left no doubt. Giving in wasn't just inevitable, it was the only truth left between us. The night it finally happened, it felt as though the world stopped breathing. For so long, there had been glances that lingered too long, silences that carried more meaning than words ever could, touches that brushed against the skin and left fire burning beneath. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment when all of it broke free, when restraint gave way to truth, when the boundaries that had held us apart shattered into nothing. His eyes met mine, steady and searching, as though asking for permission without speaking it. The air was heavy with everything unspoken, charged in a way that made it impossible to step back. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might echo in the stillness. And then he was closer, close enough that his breath warmed my lips, close enough that I could feel his hesitation trembling against my own. For a heartbeat, I thought he might pull away, but then his lips touched mine, and the dam inside me broke. The first kiss was not rushed, not careless. It was deep, slow, filled with years of silence finally given a voice. It felt like surrender and discovery all at once, a truth long denied but impossible to resist. My hands reached for him almost without thought, and when his fingers traced down my back, it felt as if every wall I had built around myself crumbled into dust. Skin against skin, breath against breath, the world around us disappeared until there was nothing left but us. Clothing slipped away, not hurried but inevitable, each layer falling like another barrier collapsing between us. His hands trembled slightly, not with uncertainty, but with the weight of what we were doing, what we were becoming. The warmth of his skin against mine sent shivers racing through me, a mix of hunger and tenderness that left me undone. Every inch of me felt alive beneath his touch, as if I had been asleep for years and only now was waking. The way he looked at me, eyes dark and unguarded, was more intimate than any kiss or touch. It was as though he was seeing me stripped not only of clothes, but of everything I had ever used to protect myself. There was no hiding in that gaze, there was no pretending, and instead of fear I felt freedom. For the first time, I let myself be seen completely, and he didn't look away. Every movement was both fire and tenderness. The urgency of desire was there, but beneath it pulsed something deeper, something that melted lust into love, until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. His mouth found my neck, my shoulder, every place that made me shiver, and I clung to him as though letting go would mean losing more than just a moment. It was raw, it was overwhelming, but it was also achingly gentle, as though he knew exactly how to touch not just my body but my soul. There were moments of stillness, too, when we simply breathed together, our foreheads pressed close, our eyes meeting in a silence that said more than words ever could. In those quiet seconds, the weight of it all sank in. This wasn't just hunger, it wasn't just need, it was something far deeper, something that rewrote everything I thought I knew about love. His hand on my cheek, his thumb brushing softly across my skin, was enough to make me tremble more than any fire between us. And then there was the breaking point, the moment when bodies gave fully to one another, when every ounce of tension exploded into release. It wasn't just physical, It was emotional, spiritual, something that reached into the deepest parts of me and brought them back to life. The way he whispered my name against my ear, the way his voice broke with urgency, the way his arms held me so tightly I felt like I belonged in a place I had never known before. All of it carved itself into me forever. Time lost its shape that night. Minutes, hours. They blurred together into waves of passion and tenderness, each one stronger than the last. There was no beginning and no end, only the feeling of being completely consumed and completely safe at the same time. Every kiss, every touch, every breath we shared became a truth I couldn't deny, a truth that had waited too long in silence, but now that it had been spoken through our bodies, could never be taken back. When it finally softened, when the intensity faded into a quiet stillness, he pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me like a promise. My head rested against his chest, and I listened to the rhythm of his heartbeat, strong and unsteady at the same time. That sound was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard, because it wasn't just his. It was ours, beating in the same rhythm, belonging to a moment that could never be undone. Lust had brought us together, yes, but what stayed long after was something so much more. It was love, undeniable and unstoppable, written into every breath, every touch, every whisper of that night. A love that shattered boundaries, erased rules, and made me believe in something bigger than both of us. That night changed everything, because it wasn't just passion. It was love finally allowed to live. The morning after was never supposed to feel like that. I had convinced myself it would be simple, something to bury, something to fold into memory and keep hidden in the dark. But the truth was different. The truth was in the way my body still trembled when I thought of his hands, in the way my lips still burned from his kiss, in the way my heart raced when the night replayed itself behind my eyes. It wasn't just a moment of weakness, not just passion that flared and burned out. It was something deeper, something that had rewired me from the inside, leaving me unable to return to who I was before. Lying there in the quiet, I realized that everything had shifted. The bed still carried the warmth of his body, the air still held the echo of his voice, and my skin was marked with the memory of every place he had touched. It should have been nothing more than physical, something my mind could file away under mistakes or indulgences, but it wasn't. The way he held me when it was over, the way his eyes softened as if he saw something sacred in me, had cut deeper than flesh. It wasn't just sex, it was truth. The longing began immediately, a hunger that wasn't satisfied by the night, but awakened by it. I found myself searching for him even when he wasn't there, craving not only his touch but his presence, the way he made the room feel fuller, the way his silence could steady me. My heart beat differently now, carrying his rhythm as though it had been fused to mine. I didn't expect it, I didn't ask for it, but there it was, undeniable. Every thought of him carried me back to that night. The heat, yes, but also the tenderness, the way his hand lingered on my face as though it was too precious to rush past. The way he whispered softly, not just with desire, but with a kind of reverence that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. Those things mattered more than the fire of our bodies, because they reached inside and touched places I had buried. I tried to pretend for a while that it was just physical, that the longing I felt was nothing more than desire left unsatisfied, that if I ignored it long enough it would fade, but it didn't. If anything, it grew stronger. Every ordinary task reminded me of him. Every silence seemed filled with his absence. The world had become divided into two pieces, the one before that night and the one after. The first was gone forever. There was fear in that realization, because I knew the risk of it, the weight of what it meant to want someone in a way that went beyond flesh. But the fear didn't stop the longing. If anything, it made it more intoxicating. The danger of it, the impossibility, only made the memory sharper, the craving deeper. My heart had been rewired, and no amount of logic could undo it. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I could still feel the way his arms tightened around me afterward, as if holding me wasn't just comfort but necessity. That memory haunted me more than any passion. It was the kind of intimacy that strips you bare, the kind that makes you understand that connection isn't about the body alone. It's about trust, about letting someone step inside the places you've kept locked. He had done that without asking, and now every part of me was marked by it. The longing that followed was not just for another night, though the desire for it burned constantly. It was for everything that came with it. The way he looked at me like I was something rare, the way he breathed my name like it mattered, the way his presence felt like belonging. I couldn't undo it, couldn't forget it. It lived in me, shaping every thought, every breath, until I couldn't remember who I was without it. I had always believed passion was fleeting, that it flared hot and then faded, leaving only ashes. But this was different. This was not a fire that consumed and then died. This was a flame that had lit something permanent, a truth that couldn't be hidden again. The night had given me more than desire. It had given me a love I had never dared to hope for, one that made every moment afterward feel sharper, fuller, more alive. And so I lived in that longing, not as a wound, but as a reminder that something inside me had awakened, that I had been touched in a way that changed everything. No matter what came after, no matter how impossible it might be, I knew the truth. That night wasn't just sex. It was love, undeniable and unforgettable, and once it had been awakened, there was no going back. And if these stories speak to your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes in love's power. Until next time, stay with love.